Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Rebar, and I am the Director of Events and Marketing here at Power to Fly. Super excited for this talk on Stop Buying AI Tools, Start Building AI Readiness. And our speaker for this talk is my good friend and my Power to Fly colleague, Sanmaya Mohanty, who is the founder of Curious AI Foundation, a nonprofit working to make 30 million Indians AI ready by 2030, with a focus on underserved communities and grassroots impacts across India. The organization works in active partnerships with state governments to bring structured AI education to students and professionals at scale. Samaya is a React Native developer turned developer advocate turned product marketing leader, and I could probably add a few other things in there as well. And for you who don't know, Sanmaya is also very key to making sure that our Power to Fly summits happen and our virtual job fairs and so many other things that we do here. So, Sanmaya, I know it feels weird to say, but welcome to the Power to Fly stage.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rob, for the amazing introduction and yeah, for the session. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's get started.
Yeah, I have some
All
questions
right.
for you, but I know you've got some slides. So why don't you take that away and then we'll jump in with some questions a little later on.
Absolutely, absolutely. That sounds amazing. So let me share my screen and please do let me know if you're able to view my screen. Yeah.
Yes, there it is.
All right, cool. So, to all of our viewers, the sound, the title is pretty, like pretty bold that stop buying AI tools and start building AI readiness. What does it really mean? So that's something we'll dive. If it's your organization where, you have spent a ton of money getting all the licenses and, you're one of those leaders where like, is AI working for me? Or is it not working? So this session would help you walk out with the reasons to understand why, you know, when AI is all the craze, why AI isn't working for your organization, or you're not able to see the kind of output that you thought AI would enable your organization to. So let's get started. All right. So as I mentioned, your organization has probably already spent money on AI. That could be a ton of license purchase, like OpenAI licenses or Microsoft Copilot licenses, but they are all sitting idle. Maybe you have spent a ton of money on corporate training sessions. You have held training sessions for all of the verticals that you have in your organization. You know. So again, I'm not here to sell any tool or just another training because you have already spent money on that. Problem isn't that you haven't invested, you have. The problem is, have you been measuring the right thing? So that brings us towards looking at the question that why isn't it working? Why isn't AI working the way it should? Because when you open Twitter, you see all of these glaring stories that how a single person built $1 million company. So why the employees in your organization or the AI policies that you have or the tools that you have deployed aren't bringing the kind of results that you thought of. So I'm here to give you a fresh perspective or a fresh look into all of these questions. That if AI is not working in your organization, what could be the reason and what's the way to look at it? All right. So so as we mentioned, I'm here to reframe the question of why AI isn't working. This is not another session where, I push you to buy another tool that, okay, I'm not a snake oil salesman over here. Buy this tool and this will solve everything, or buy this training and this will solve everything. AI is still very much experimental. We are still in uncharted territories, and nobody actually has figured out anything. And if somebody tells you so, that's the biggest red flag. So, you might have already mandated tool usage, but you cannot mandate readiness. Readiness is actually a state or, a state of the culture. AI has to be baked into the culture. And as the saying goes, what gets measured gets improved. So if in order to improve, you have to measure the right things. So mostly, in our experience of working with the grassroots foundations or the corporates across the globe, what we have found that most companies, measure the licenses they have purchased, or if all of the people in their organization have attended a compulsory training, or they are deploying certain tools, or their engineering team created a new blog. Okay, these are some of the integrations that we have deployed. And the leadership holds town halls every other month about, okay, this is the sort of AI readiness that we have deployed this much into AI training and whatnot. And there are like multiple surveys maybe, where you get positive results that, okay, X 80% of our users or 80% of our employees are actually using AI tools. But the result doesn't show on the ground. What you should be measuring instead is, are there any actual workflows that have changed? Are there any behaviors that have shifted? If X employee was doing, Y thing for the last 10 years or last 5 years using a manual process, has AI enabled them to take that step to change their entire workflow? Are people using AI to independently solve problems? And AI is something that shouldn't only trickle, at the top levels. It shouldn't stop at being just words only. Is the middle management using the AI tools and propagating that downward as well? And as I mentioned, this is all uncharted territory. AI and this world is changing every single week, or at times every single day even. So are people experimenting enough? So these are the questions and these are the thoughts that I want you to ponder upon. And keep your organization in mind when we talk about all of these questions, and ask yourself these questions. Are there any workflows changed, behavior shifted, and are people open to do experiments? So, yeah, that's what we'll be discussing in this session. And the word AI readiness, what does it actually mean? I want you to give you a framework where you can measure the state of AI in your organization. And you can do an honest self-assessment. And these frameworks, these are not theoretical, these are created by our on-ground work with our non-profit arm, and our interaction with numerous corporates in the last couple of years. So these came from having and propagating AI education in the rural India, where the constraints are very real. So these are battle tested frameworks that have worked across very constrained systems. So this has worked for a 13-year-old in rural India, and this also works for a mid-career professional in Seattle. So, when you take these two words, these are two very different worlds, where we are trying to propagate AI. So these are some of the frameworks that we have created through our on-ground work in the last couple of years. And yeah, I'm going to take you through it. And through all of this, I want you to keep your organization in mind, and ask yourself these questions with respect to your own organization. All right, so moving towards the 5 dimensions for organizational AI readiness. Now, this is the framework for self-assessment, and this is the framework that we use for assessing organizations on how well they have imbibed AI into their DNA or into their cultural DNA. So one is tool fluency. There's no dearth of tools in the market. So how fluent are your employees using the tool? Because it's at most of the times it's not a skill gap, it's an awareness gap. Then second is prompt intelligence. Are your team members, are your employees able to use prompts the way it should be used? Are they able to give it the context that it requires? And are they able to communicate clearly in a very detailed manner with the AI agent they're interacting with? Because at the end, AI is still a system that goes by algorithms. The more detailed your algorithms are or your prompts are, the better your input. That will dictate how better your output kind of gets. Then process integration. Does your organization have enough processes that integrate with the AI workflow that you are aiming to have? And then, is your leadership ready? Is AI trickling from the top down, top to the down, or is it just still in the jargon stage? And the last is psychological safety. That's a whole another topic which I'll go to in depth when I explain all of these dimensions. So yeah, let's get started with the first dimension, which is tool fluency. Now, the question, it basically becomes a very easy question. Can your people actually use AI, or are they just aware of the jargons? Like, okay, agentic AI, because, every single day, 10 new jargons get added to the AI dictionary. So are they fluent with the jargons, or are they actually using AI? And it's very simple. All I want to do is, in your organization, if you're a COO or, HR professional or a learning and development professional in your company, ask any employee to show you a workflow that they have changed in the last 30 days. If they can't show you something, then there's a gap in the usage of tools. And awareness and fluency are not the same thing. Most training programs like stop at awareness. Okay, this is a tool, this can be used for this thing, but how to use it? Like for instance, let's say you have Microsoft Copilot that is ingrained with, but that has multiple, or you have Claude that has multiple skills. So you can directly create documents or PowerPoint files or even meta ads directly through Claude, and you can use those plugins. But how many people are actually using that? So a great question or a great diagnostic would be to ask any employee, be it in marketing, be it in tech, or any vertical that you can think of, and ask them or give them a challenge to show you a workflow that they have changed completely from manual to AI automated in the last 30 days. If you can't find one, you know where to look into, or you know which area you're lagging. Then moving on, we have prompt intelligence, the second pillar of our second dimension of our AI readiness audit is prompt intelligence. Is are your teams giving useful prompts? Because garbage in equals to garbage out. So if you don't give detailed, thorough prompts, as input to the agent, you won't get a proper output. And that's not AI to blame. That's basically an awareness issue. So to just understand if this is an area where your team is lagging, just pull up 10 real prompts your team has used. You might be using Copilot or OpenAI or Claude's Anthropic's Claude. Just go into the logs and pull up any 5 to 10 prompts that your team has actually used over the last 1 month. I can assure you, you'll find some clues over there. Are the prompts one-liners? If the prompts are one-liners, like, if somebody in your marketing team is writing to the agent that, okay, give me a marketing email. Of course, the AI agent will give you a garbage because you haven't given it any additional context. You haven't given it your brand voice. You haven't given it what kind of marketing email is it? Is it for awareness? Is it for closing a deal? Is it for some other purpose? So just look at it. Are the prompts simple one-liners? If they are, then you know that this is the area where your team is lacking. Or other markers here could be, is the entire organization prompting? You can easily find these details from the Microsoft Copilot logs or OpenAI logs. What kind of prompts? Is everybody prompting, or are there only like 3 or 4 people who are prompting? Because these are the actual usage statistics. This is not a survey that we are looking at. So this will give you a real raw bone insight into what's actually working in your organization, or how the actual tools or the licenses that your company is spending, millions or thousands of millions of dollars, are they actually getting used? So yeah, that's basically the prompt intelligence pillar. Then moving on, the third pillar is process integration. So is AI integrated into all of your processes, the core processes in your organization, or is it an optional side habit? So the diagnostic for it would be, open your SOPs and onboarding docs. If a new person joins your team, do they have to be AI native, or AI is just an afterthought? So if AI is optional, then optional means inconsistent. So if you're wondering why you're not getting the results, if AI is not ingrained into your processes and your SOPs and your structure, then it's fitting that you won't get the results, get the consistent results that you're you're set out to look for. So integration is a bridge between individual adoption and organizational structure-wide adoption. So take a look at your SOPs, take a look at your onboarding docs, take a look at all the structural documentations or the structural pillars that you have. Is AI a core in all of those? If not, that's somewhere you got to live. Then we have moving on to the fourth pillar of the AI readiness uh, structure, which is the leadership modeling. Are your leaders using AI visibly, or are they just mandating it downward? Because this is something, AI is very experimentation and execution heavy technology. It's not something you can just talk about. You have to use it to show that, show the outcomes or show the results or show how it can make a change. So when the best rubric to judge on this pillar is basically, when did a senior leader last share a AI assisted output? This could be a leadership call, power presentation, or some insight that the leader used to use the AI to churn up from the internal company docs. So if the leadership team is using it actively and propagating it downward, then it's more likely to show up as a real use case rather than just town hall talks or talks about how much money was invested in getting those AI tools. Is the leadership walking the talk? So that's one thing you should bake into your organizational culture to make sure that the effects of AI or the outputs of AI are visible in your organization basically. Now, moving on to the last, and which is the most powerful, what should I say, pillar. And, I have dedicated a complete slide for it. That is basically psychological safety. And, this is the most overlooked part and portion of why teams are not able to leverage AI in the ways they should. Because, as I mentioned, AI is still uncharted territory. I mean, let's get out of our bubbles of X and Reddit and Hacker News. 99% of the population still doesn't know, still thinks AI is Chat GPT or AI is Claude. They all the we are still living in a bubble, in a very small, short bubble, and AI is still experimental. So things are bound to fail. Do your employees feel safe to experiment and fail? Have you created that psychological safety in your organization where for your employees it's okay to fail because it's still an experimental technology? It's been here for like 2 or 3 years. It's not as matured as, like, let's say, cloud or the World Wide Web. It's still very experimental, and it's most likely, there'll be inconsistencies in the output, there'll be inconsistencies in the way systems were modeled. Are your employees made to feel safe, to if something fails, are they encouraged to experiment and fail? So, that's the easy diagnostics. If, this is the reason that's holding your organization back, is, in your next all hands call or in your next stand up meeting, ask everybody who here has tried AI and it failed miserably. If you don't get a few raised hands or, few weird stories, then you understand that you have a performative culture where everybody, just nods their head and says that they're using AI, but while it's just limited to logging into once or twice, or just nodding their heads in the org-wide calls. So this is the most, in our experience, is the most important rubric where most organizations fail. And as the saying goes, the most dangerous AI culture isn't one where nobody's using it. It's one where everybody pretends to use it. So make sure that your organization provides the psychological safety net to all of your employees to just try it and let it fail, because it's a very new technology, and more often than not, it will fail. So yeah, that brings us to the entire 5-point pillar structure of AI readiness for your organization. Now, after the session is over, when you're watching it, on the day of the event, y- you'll receive a checklist where you can judge your organization for all of these rubrics. Let me just quickly show you this. So this is something that you'll receive in your post-event email, and in the blog post. This will be the AI readiness scorecards, where across all of these 5 pillars that I've mentioned, you get the questions and you get the rubrics to score your organization and your organizational fluency and readiness on using AI and AI tools. So we have tool fluency, we have prompt intelligence, we have process integration, we have leadership modeling, we have psychological safety, and you'll get a score out of 75. And how to understand your score, you have all the rubrics over here. So you'll be receiving this as a post-event toolkit. Now, moving on, where does your organization stand and what to understand from these scores? So once you score yourself, honestly, using the rubric that I just shared, you know these are the 3 basic categories. So if your organization scores between 60 and 75, you have very strong foundations across all 5 dimensions, and your organization is what we call AI forward organization. And if it's between 35 to 60, then it's like your intent is right, you're focusing on all the right things, but either the psychological safety pillar or the process integration, from what we have seen in our experience, these are the things that are holding you down. And if your score is below 35, then either AI is absent in your organization, or you have a performative AI culture where everybody nods, but nobody actually understands what to use AI for in their day-to-day life and how can it change the workflows that they have been manually doing for years. And can AI give consistent results? People are wondering and people are scratching their heads. The leadership is, talking on town hall and it's spending money, but they are not seeing any results. So these are basically the 3, uh, you know, what should I say, brackets that we have seen all the organizations fall into. All right. So moving on, these are the curious observation, the things that I just mentioned. Most common, we have seen that the most organization that will be listening to this session are in the yellow band, or the medium band. That's not a which are they are AI aware, but they're not AI forward. So most companies would kind of land in this band. I'm curious to know where your organization lands. Please comment in the YouTube channel below, or send us an email of where you land. Uh, there are some companies which will land in the red band, and it's more common than people admit, especially in organizations. Those have been very loud about the AI strategy without building the underlying structures and the culture. And the green band, which is the AI forward band, that's pretty rare because since it's a very experimental technology, and organizations often take time to get it ingrained into their DNA. If it's not a shame if your organization doesn't land here, but we'll work together to get your organization to the AI forward band. Now, with that being said, that brings us to the last of my presentation, and we'll move to the Q&A afterwards. So Curious AI Foundation is offering a couple of AI readiness audit sessions for free. These would be 30-minute sessions where we will sit with you with a structured set of questions, and from our experience, these are the questions companies and people most often miss in the self-assessment. And you will, after this session, you will be ready with scored assessment across all 5 dimensions, and you'll get clarity on your single highest leverage gap. And then you'll get a 90-day action roadmap to, how you can move your company from AI, if it's, from the red band to the yellow band to the green band. We want to move your company to the AI forward band. And this is not a sales pitch. There's no obligation. It's completely free and completely real. The reason we do it with corporates and other organizations, because we get to see our learnings, and apply our learnings on a live setting. And more often than not, the organization that find value in these AI readiness audit sessions, and who see the AI output soar after the AI readiness session, they usually partner with us, with our nonprofit, to scale our operations on ground. So this is completely free, completely real, and would love to see if the people, if you take the ordinary session, you'll be getting the link to book the session in your post-event email. And yeah, that brings me to the end of the session.
Thank
Over to the
you.
Q&A, Rob.
Yeah, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what band I fall into. So thank you. This was so great. And we're almost out of time, but I did want to ask you definitely one question, which is for anyone who is listening right now, whether they're an L&D person, whether they're an HR person, aside from taking your audit, because that's definitely something they should do. But aside from that, what's one thing they can do this week right now to continue their AI journey?
Absolutely. So the easiest thing to see where your organization lands in the AI readiness scale is to just pull the actual prompts that your employees are using. If your organization uses Microsoft Copilot, or Claude or OpenAI, go to the enterprise dashboard, pull the last the prompts that the employees have used in the last 30 days. I can assure you, you'll find one of these three or four outcomes. One, you could find one-liner prompts. If that's happening, that's basically a awareness gap, and not a skills gap. Or you could find that, okay, only two or three people have made all the prompts. So that shows that AI readiness, or AI hasn't spread across your organization. There are only some champions, but not everyone is using it. Or the off case, you find zero prompts. That shows that people are not even using the tools that the company has provided them, and it's a
Mhm.
license graveyard. Like you have allotted like 400 license of Claude, but
Yeah.
people are not at all using it. So just pull the actual prompts, the actual usage from your enterprise dashboard, and see where your organization is standing. That's
Yeah, I
my
just
clear
interviewed
takeaway.
someone earlier this week, and they were talking about an organization they were working with that spent $900,000, and the
Whoa,
adoption is less than 20%, which to me is not $900,000 worth, right? So this
exactly.
is this is, I think, coming up more and more now. This is like the third conversation I've had touching on this recently, where now that everyone is starting to use the tools and kind of put it out there, where is the adoption actually happening? So I think this is great to talk about now, because I think now that organizations have kind of put their to toe into the pool, now they have to like start wading further into the water. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
and before we let you go, San Maya, as you mentioned, we're going to share these resources on our post summit blog post. If you're watching the recording right now, later, well, just go to powertofly.com. You can find all of that there. But where else should people connect with you directly and also learn more about Curious AI Foundation?
Absolutely. So you can directly go to curiousai.org to look at the work that we have been doing at the grassroots levels, and you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter at my ID is linkedin.com/n/Sanmay Mohanty. Direct my name, and my name is pretty unique. You won't find much people with this name, so you can directly search for my name. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So yeah, those are the best way to reach me.
Or find him at many Power to Fly events. So thank you, Sam Maya.
Absolutely.
We will definitely continue this conversation with you. And thank you, everyone, for listening, and more amazing talks ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob, for this amazing chance for this amazing conversation. And glad to be here, and glad to help other organizations take their AI readiness to the next level.
Of course. Love it.